The bill of materials form is divided into an upper and lower section. The upper section shows the BOMs that are in your legal entity or company, and the lower section shows the BOM versions that are defined for the selected BOM in the upper section. This form allows you to create a BOM that does not have any items associated to it yet. It is a good tool for BOMs in the initial planning stages. Let's open AX and I'll show you how to use this form to create a new BOM. I'll start by going to Inventory Management, and then underneath the Common area, I'll open up the Bill of Materials form. Here, I'll go ahead and create a new BOM by clicking the New icon. A BOM number is automatically generated based on the number sequence that is configured. For my example, I'll go ahead and make a complete speaker set. I can optionally select which site and item group this will be related to. I'll go ahead and select Site 1 and item group Audio. Next, I'll open up the lines of the BOM so that I can begin adding components. In the BOM line form, I'll use the grid to add all of the different items and components that are needed to make the complete speaker set. So I'll go ahead and find a few different speakers to add to my speaker set. I'll start with a standard speaker. This particular speaker does not have size, color, configuration, or style. The warehouse defaulted in based on the configuration from that particular item. If required, we could override it. Let's say this particular speaker set requires 2, so I'll type 2 into the quantity field. In the per series field, I can indicate the number of units that the quantity applies to. The quantity of 2 is to make 1 complete speaker set. Sometimes it might be necessary to increase the per series so that the quantity field will extend correctly. This is really useful in situations where the quantities being consumed are very small. Next, I'll click the New button and add a second item. I'll go ahead and select a mid-range speaker. Again, this particular item does not require a size, color, configuration, or style. We'll go ahead and consume these from Warehouse 13 as well. It's important to note that if the warehouse is not specified, then the system will use the warehouse that's specified on the item setup based on whether or not the resource consumption checkbox is selected. We'll say that this particular speaker set requires 2 of these mid-range speakers. You'll notice that this particular item has a different symbol. When you look at the item type field, you can see that this is an item and the first line is a bill of material. This means that that particular speaker is made up of additional parts. When you select a line that has a bill of material related to it, you can click the Lines button to view that sub-BOM version. Here you can see the parts that are required to make the original standard speaker. Let's close this form and go back. One of the other things you can do from this form is use the Where Used button. The Where Used button will show you all the other bill of materials that are currently using this particular item. This is a useful feature in the event that a change needs to be made to this particular item. Next, let's click through some of the other tabs and discuss some of the other fields. On the General tab, there are several additional fields. You can see there's a field for position. This allows you to organize the lines in the BOM in a certain sequence. Sometimes this is useful for production purposes. If the line you've added to your bill of material is for a subcontracted line, then you'll want to select the vendor account by clicking on the drop-down box and selecting the appropriate vendor. When the purchase order is generated for that particular line, the vendor selected here will be used to create that purchase order. On the right-hand side, you'll want to select the line type. The line type will always default to item, but you can change this to be another line type. For example, this particular line is a BOM. If I wanted to select that this is a phantom BOM, I can go ahead and select phantom from the drop-down box. This will indicate that the items in the sub-BOM are still required to make the complete speaker set. However, they won't be pre-created in a separate production order and placed in inventory. You can also select a sub-BOM or formula and a sub-route. At the bottom, you can select the from and to date that this particular line will be effective for. You can also specify an operation number. At this point, we have not created any routes, so there will be no operations available. This is useful when in the production process, these items should be consumed at a specific step in the production process. We'd be able to click the drop-down box and select the step when this particular item is to be consumed. You can also mark the end checkbox if the consumption of this item during the production process should trigger the ending of that particular production operation. On the Setup tab, you can enter the consumption information. You can see the quantity and per series fields here, as well as the unit. The formula is standard. This is what is used for most lines, but you'll notice that there are some additional standards. If you want to use step consumption, you'll select the step option and then use the step consumption grid to enter the quantities for the series of quantities to be produced. For example, if creating 1 speaker requires 2, but creating 2 speakers requires 8, then I can enter that information here. We'll talk about these other options a little bit more later on in the measurements chapter. The next field is the consumption. Here you can select whether the consumption of this item is variable or constant. If you set the consumption to constant, then 2 items will be consumed no matter how many are being produced. This is useful when you need to add items to the bill of material that are required for setup or completion purposes, but are not actually increased based on the number of the finished good you are creating. For my example, I'll leave it as variable because I need 2 speakers every time I create an additional speaker set. You can also select the flushing principle. The flushing principle will default based on what is configured on the particular item. There are 3 options available: start, finish, and manual. When the flushing principle is set to start, then when a production order is created for this item, the item can automatically be consumed when the production order is started. The next option is called finish. When you set the flushing principle to finish, this item will automatically be consumed when the production order is reported as finished. When the manual option is selected, it indicates that this particular item must be manually picked and registered against the production order. You can also specify how scrap will work on this particular order. You can specify a constant scrap, which is a flat amount, or a variable scrap, which is a percentage. We'll discuss this a little bit more later in another module. On the right-hand side, you can select the rounding options. The default behavior is to use no rounding. Here, you can select if the rounding is based on a quantity, a measurement, or the consumption. If you select that the rounding should be based on quantity, measurement, or consumption, additional fields will need to be configured, including the multiples. In some cases, it might be required to round up the consumption of a particular item to a multiple of a case. For example, if I open a case of flour to create a cake, I need to use the entire case of flour, even if the whole recipe doesn't call for the entire case of flour, because the flour cannot be reused in another cake recipe. Now that we've reviewed the bill of materials form and how to create a bill of material, let's go back to the bill of material form and I'll show you how you can approve and activate your BOM. So I'm back on the bill of materials form, and here you can see a button at the top where I can click the Approve button. This will open a dialog box where you can select who is approving it. By default, your current worker will be selected, and then you click OK. Once the bill of material is approved, you can see that the Approval field and Approved checkbox are populated with the information. In our next lesson, we'll talk a little bit more about how to use the BOM Designer form.